Part 39. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 396. The strength and toughness of these spider silks were far beyond their imagination. Ivan even put the muzzle of his gun on them and fired, but he still could not break these threads. You must know that the gauze rifle in their hands is a special model for power armor. The 8mm caliber C-14 piton-piercing electromagnetic bullet can easily penetrate 25mm thick solid carbide armor and 1.6 meter thick armor. Concrete bunker. But these threads, which were still liquid a second ago, easily dispelled the terrifying kinetic energy attached to the warhead. It's over. Leighton subconsciously wanted to raise his hands to protect his head, but he found that he had lost control of his body. More and more spider silk stuck to his body, and even the small gaps at the joints were filled. After the liquid condensed, it was directly stuck inside the transmission device, making every move of the entire armor possible. The joints have become extremely stiff. If the strong glue that invades the mechanical structure is not removed in time, it will cause great wear and tear to the mechanical parts inside the armor, and even directly cause the power armor to be completely scrapped, but now the two of them are simply unable to do so. There is no chance to clean up. The monster used thousands of spider threads to drag the two people in front of it, and slapped it hard with two huge palms. Leighton only felt that his perspective shook extremely violently, and the bones in his body felt like it was as if he had been knocked to pieces, and unbearable pain came from all parts of his body. This is also thanks to the protection of the rigid frame within the armor. Otherwise, he would have turned into a puddle of unrecognizable flesh just like the miners who were just hit by the monster. Hiss, it hurts, voice command. 714, inject analgesics. Leighton grinned. Beep, voice command. 714, confirmed. An electronic synthesized voice sounded inside the helmet, and a hidden groove on the inside of the armor slid open silently, and a needle was inserted into Leighton's arm. Huh. The pain gradually subsided, and then Leighton had time to ask about Ivan's condition. Hey, Lao Yi? Are you still alive? Still alive. Ivan's voice came from the earphones, which made Leighton sigh in relief, but these things cover up the monitor and the transparent mask on the helmet. I can't see anything. Can't see. Don't move yet, Leighton gasped. This monster seems to think we are dead and did not continue to attack. But it didn't leave either. The heartbeat detector showed it was standing in front of us. Can the heartbeat detector detect this monster? Yes, it has 6 hearts, and the beating frequency of each heart is more than 4 times the upper limit of the normal human heart rate, Ivan said. I have a way to get out of trouble, but I can't guarantee it will work, Leighton said. Any solution? Burn it with fire. I feel that this thing is similar to spider silk. The strength of spider silk is actually very exaggerated. When I was researching bulletproof materials, I sent people to the insect breeding base to get a lot of genuine goods. Spider silk, but this thing has a very obvious weakness, which is that it is afraid of fire. The main component of spider silk is protein. It will quickly denature and decompose under high temperatures. The material that makes up these silk threads is the secretion of the monster. It should also be a kind of protein in essence. You can try this method, Ivan affirmed. Then I'll count to 3, 2, and 1. Let's open the compressed air valve to the maximum, jump to the middle together, and then turn the nozzle of the propeller to the front to burn off all the spider silk on each other's bodies. Clear. 3, 2, 1, get up. Following Leighton's low roar, the 2 powered armors lying in the shallow pit flew up at the same time. The spider webs were stuck to their fronts, but the backpack behind them was not affected much, and the compressed air jets, the nozzles of the propeller and thruster, are not blocked either. I've got you, Leighton shouted, his hands already grasping Ivan's shoulders, and Ivan locked his elbows tightly with both arms. The 2 pieces of power armor were locked together face to face. Ignition. Along with Leighton's roar, The 8 thruster nozzles simultaneously sprayed blue flames. The 2 armors seemed to be bathed in the flames, and huge repulsive force continued to come from the backpacks. Hold on tight, don't let go. The flames continued to lick the surfaces of the 2 armors, and the solidified colloid and trailing spider silk were quickly burned away, and the 2 finally broke free from the restraints. Turn the spout, be careful where you step. As soon as the spider silk burned out, the 2 of them quickly rushed to a higher place, just in time to avoid the liquid sprayed out again by the monster below. Anyway, let's get rid of this monster first, Layton said. The cover of the missile launch nest on his shoulder had already been ejected. More than a dozen micromissiles were shooting straight down with a white trail. A series of explosions produced the fire, and smoke directly enveloped the monster. Keep the fire suppressed, these missiles can't kill it. Layton raised his arms again, and the machine gun hidden under the wrist armor began to pour ammunition into the smoke that had not dissipated, and countless bullet casings flew in all directions. I think we have to find a way to contact the Greek, Ivan said while holding a Gauss rifle and firing. His armored weapons are not as rich as Layton's. This 8mm Gauss rifle is already the most powerful weapon on his body. But this damn interference has not weakened. Damn it, Layton threw away the 2 red gun barrels and dragged out a rocket launcher from the equipment box behind him. The situation here is no longer under the control of the 2 of us. The monster's heartbeat has not disappeared. Our intense firepower cannot kill it. We must request external reinforcements, Ivan said. Then what are you going to do? I held this monster back, and you took the opportunity to rush outside the space station. I think this interference should come from the space station itself. Once you get outside, you should be able to contact the Greek ship. That won't work. I should be responsible for containing them. My equipment has much stronger firepower than you, Layton retorted. What's the point of having more firepower? Isn't it still impossible to kill it? Besides, high-power communication equipment is also installed on your armor. If you don't go, who else can go? Damn, forget about this. Layton couldn't help but cursed. Then be careful, don't die. Succubuli. You bastard, don't set a flag for me. Kaylan is right, you have a humming mouth. At this time, on the other side of the residential area, Asano Akira, who had followed Kaylan and the servant of God all the way here, stopped at a fork in the road. Although he has extremely terrifying hearing and can identify the direction of the footsteps of Kaylan and others, this distance is already his limit. If he goes further, he will be completely blind. Just when Asano Akira was thinking about which path to choose, a familiar voice suddenly sounded above his head. You haven't become one of us yet, and this is not the place for you to come. The speaker was a man in a gray cloak. He was sitting on the highest point of the scaffolding with his legs crossed. He was holding a half-eaten protein block in his hand. His entire face was completely under the shadow of the hood, making people unable to see his appearance clearly. Of course, even if he took off his hood, Asano Akira couldn't see his face. But after hearing this voice, Asano Akira's body was agitated, and he subconsciously clenched the guide stick in his hand. He took a deep breath, and then asked, Marshal? Marshal? Are you calling me? The man was stunned for a moment, then took another bite of the protein block in his hand and swallowed it without chewing. Oh, I haven't used this name for so long. I almost forgot, it was only a few months, but I feel like more than 10 years have passed. He seemed to be talking to himself and to Asano Akira. I'm Akira Asano, do you remember me? Are you, Asano Akira? Asano, Akira. Who are you? The man called Marshal stretched out a hand, lifted the edge of the hood slightly, and looked at Asano Akira standing below. Oh, I kind of remember, you were the little dwarf who was often bullied in that place. I didn't expect you to be still alive. He stuffed the last half of the protein block in his hand into his mouth. It's good. Living is a good thing, there is nothing more joyful than living in this world. He jumped down from the scaffolding and stood directly in front of Asano Akira. The microgravity environment did not seem to have any impact on him. Not only did his falling speed not slow down, even the corners of his cloak did not float up. The ground hung at his feet. Although Akira Asano couldn't see it, he could feel that something seemed to be covering Marshall's body, completely isolating him from the surrounding space. "Although I am glad that you are still alive, I still can't let it go," Marshall said. "Maybe you shouldn't come to this place." Marshall paused and continued, "I can smell that rotten smell on you, you even brought your knife, so, what is the purpose of your coming here?" P.S. Regarding the chapters of the past few days, some readers said that Ivan was not willing to kill anyone, saying that it was too holy. I want to explain it in a long way here, I hope you can read it patiently. To be honest, the attribute of the Virgin has indeed become one of the poisonous points of most online novels. The vast majority of readers like to read plots of decisive killings. As the saying goes, if you don't care for yourself, you will be punished by heaven and earth. What's more, everyone's daily life is already very tiring and hard, so reading novels after work is just to relax. A refreshing picture, and a way to release the dark side of human nature. I think this is understandable. After all, people always need to vent, and many people choose to use the fictional world in novels as a place to vent negative emotions. When I was writing this part of the plot, I thought twice about whether it was appropriate to write it this way: a character who can decisively shoot and kill parasitized teammates at the beginning, and now becomes like this. Does it count as a character breakdown? I have thought about it many times whether I will be called a holy mother by readers. But in the end, I decided to write it as I originally intended. I really want to write about the true emotions and hearts of human beings, although I know that this kind of plot may not be cool enough in your opinion, and may make you feel poisonous, or even abandon the article directly. But what I want to say is that I designed the transformation of Ivan's character based on myself. Because of my special experience, I may have been closer to death than 90%, or more of the readers who are reading this novel. When I was first diagnosed with leukemia, I no longer wanted to feel that way again. Go and think about it. During the subsequent 1 year and 3 months of treatment, there were countless times when various indicators fell below the critical value due to bone marrow suppression after chemotherapy. Now when I open my medical record, I can see there is a large row of red warning data, and every time, it is basically hovering on the edge of the death line. I clearly remember the beginning of 2020, when the epidemic was at its worst. At that time, I had just finished a round of chemotherapy and my platelets had dropped to the point where they could no longer be detected. But at that time, no one donated blood at all, including my parents and some relatives. Didn't meet blood donation standards. At that time, when I thought I was dead, my attending doctor helped me go to the city next door to urgently transfer a bag of platelets, which allowed me to survive the granulocyte deficiency period. There have been many similar experiences. Every time I felt like I was about to die, and then I was rescued by a bunch of people. Since then, my mentality has changed. To be honest, I used to be a very selfish person, heartless, with a bad temper, and full of dissatisfaction with the world and other people, but after this serious illness, I have seen through many things, and I want to treat any stranger with kindness, because I don't know that when I was struggling on the edge of death, in the hands of countless people who gave me a hand, will he have his share? Whether it's doctors, nurses, blood donors, blood bank staff, or drivers, there are many more people I don't know. They may be my potential lifesavers, including those who have been supporting me and cheering me up. Book friends. During those desperate days, I personally felt the kindness from everyone around me. It is precisely because of this that I will have respect and kindness to everyone around me. Without you, I might have been a dead person long ago. I am willing to believe in the goodness in human nature and no longer have those extreme and dark thoughts. And Ivan in this book is actually very similar to me. He was infected by the seed of corrosion and was already in despair. He thought he was bound to die. However, the protagonist and the others tried their best to save him. At this time, Ivan's mentality was similar to mine. Variety. I think only those who have been infinitely close to death will understand the meaning of cherishing life. What's more, Ivan himself is a doctor, which is a noble and respectable profession. His job is to save people, and the residents of this sick village are all patients. This is what doctors think of patients. A unique feeling. I know many friends who are studying medicine, including medical students who are still studying, and doctors who have been working for many years. For patients, even strangers, or even enemies, if he needs to be treated, he will do his best. Full strength, this is the brilliance of human nature and a virtue that we should not abandon, whether in reality or in the virtual world. In addition, Ivan once experienced a nightmare in the bottomless sinkhole, in which he transformed into a seed of erosion and slaughtered innocent people crazily. After such an experience, his subconscious also became very resistant to killing. In addition, this mission was just to find people. Before boarding the transport ship, Kaylan and the others emphasized many times that they should try not to conflict with the locals. The combination of the above points will lead to his current changes and his unwillingness to kill performance. Perhaps this kind of plot is a bit poisonous to readers who are used to reading Shuangguan, but I think it is true and reasonable. This book can be regarded as an alternative apocalyptic novel, but compared to the darkness and despair that can be seen everywhere in the apocalypse, I think hope is something more worthy of writing. In fact, I shouldn't explain these things to everyone. I hope readers can experience it by themselves during the reading process, but in today's society, there are too many impetuous people. Many people just read books at a glance, and some people can miss the clearly written parts, let alone such vaguely expressed emotions. I can see a lot of banging comments in the background every day. Sometimes I feel very unfair and depressed, and even have a desire to fight, but I know there is no point in replying to these comments. It is possible to analyze everything clearly, but if you really do this, it will be impossible to lay out foreshadowing and suspense, and it will also make the content watery. I also don't want to write this book into a white text without any connotation, simple and easy to understand at a glance. If I really want to write it like this, then why don't I choose to write a cool article that makes money faster and is easier to write? Also, I posted this paragraph in the main text instead of in the comment area and author's message because I hope that readers who watch pirated copies can also see these things. For genuine readers, reading my 2,000-word nonsense will cost about 10 cents of book currency. If anyone feels that paying an extra 10 cents is not worth it, you can join the reader group to find it. Me, I will pay 10 times the amount, the legendary false one pays 10 times. Book friends who have joined the group before can just receive the red envelope I just sent. But there is one thing to say. After I understood these words, I really felt refreshed. The reader group account has been set up to join the group with one click. You can use the latest version of Kidian app to expand the book introduction page and see it. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 397. Come to find you and take you back, Asano Akira answered bluntly. Why are you looking for me? And why are you taking me back? Are you taking me back to continue to be that group of people's guinea pig? Marshall's voice suddenly turned cold. No. I'm not taking you back to that place. Do you think I will believe what you say? Marshall interrupted. The person who broke into the Holy Land was your companion, right? Holy place. I didn't expect that the taciturn little man would learn to act stupid. After Marshall finished speaking, he suddenly took a step back. Let me ask you one last time, what is the purpose of coming here? Come to you and take you dash. Asano Akira didn't finish what he said. This time, it wasn't Marshall who interrupted him, but him who stopped himself. Because, he suddenly discovered that his eyes, which had been blind for many years, could actually see things again. He saw the dim electric lights hanging overhead, the rusty scaffolding on both sides of the passage, and Marshall, who was in front of him, 10 steps away from him. Marshall raised his head, and Asano Akira noticed that he didn't seem as old as he thought. He even looked younger than when he was in the experimental force. But in the next second, thousands of venomous snakes suddenly poured out from behind Marshall. These snakes opened their mouths angrily, with crystal venom hanging from the tips of their sharp fangs. The bright red snakes curled up in their cavities, looking as if they were about to pounce at any time. "You are here for the things in the Holy Land, right?" Marshall and Asano Akira, who had recovered his sight, looked at each other. For a moment, Asano Akira seemed to see a slender snake coming from his mouth. He spit it out, and then retracted it very quickly, so fast that people even doubted whether he was hallucinating. No. Just when Asano Akira said these two words, those venomous snakes rushed towards him. No one knew from which corner these creatures on the earth came out. 1,000 of them, no, 10,000 or even more venomous snakes completely filled the space between the scaffoldings, like giant squirming waves, slapping Asano Akira head on. "Then you go to hell," Marshall's voice came from behind the huge waves. These poisonous snakes came from every corner of Asano Akira's field of vision. They didn't look like living creatures, but more like a pervasive tide, penetrating into every blind corner of the space here. Asano Akira has no way to avoid and no way to retreat. Base. The broken bandage strips flew up, and the sword was instantly unsheathed. Holding the blade with one hand, he cut out a hemispherical blade of light in front of him, facing the huge wave composed of countless poisonous snakes. The imaginary sound of the sharp blade cutting through the scales and flesh was not heard, and the light of the sword passed through the huge waves without any hindrance. Similarly, Asano Akira did not feel the pain of the fangs piercing his body, and neither did those poisonous snakes. It penetrated his body like a ghost. What happened? When Asano Akira came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that all the venomous snakes had disappeared, as if they had never existed, while he was still standing there, holding the guide disguised as a bandage in his hand. The sword of the staff. Akira Asano's thumb gently rubbed the slip knot tied at the end of the bandage. His knife had not been unsheathed. The field of vision fell into darkness again. Everything that happened just now happened only in Akira Asano's consciousness, but in the real world, he and Marshall stood still, without moving a step. "Okay, I believe you." Once Marshall suddenly rushed to Asano Akira's side and patted his shoulder. "You are still the same as before. No, you are even more stupid than before." "But I won't go back with you." Marshall sighed faintly. "I chose a path from which there is no turning back. Man is dead." "Oh, really? This is good news," Marshall said, "but just because man is dead, it doesn't mean that the project is over. Don't think about this world being too beautiful." "But." "There is no but," I said. "I made my own choice. I got something, but I also paid a price for it. Ark will not accept me now, nor will humans." "What?" "Kid, don't ask so many questions. Just go back to where you came from. Don't come to me again. Just treat me as dead a long time ago," Marshall said lightly. "You joined them?" Asano Akira frowned and asked. "Yeah, I joined them. Even though this place is terrible and the people who live here are terrible, but at least they treat me as a kindred spirit, not a monster or a guinea pig. To be honest, I quite like it here." "Yes," Marshall said with a smile. Asano Akira was silent. His hand holding the scabbard involuntarily increased its strength. The bandage and the scabbard made of reinforced plastic rubbed against each other, making a soft squeaking sound. "Okay, I understand." After a few seconds, Asano Akira nodded. "I will leave after I get K-Lan back." He wanted to continue walking forward, but Marshall stopped him with his hand. "K-Lan? Are you talking about your companion?" Marshall paused. "Don't go any further." He has already entered the Holy Land and cannot come out. Even if he can come out, he is no longer the same person you knew before. Why? I can't explain this to you, but if you continue to move forward, you will become the enemy of everyone here, Marshall said. Including you. Including me. Akira Asano took a deep breath. He untied the slip knot on the scabbard and took a step forward. Why bother? He might be dead. Marshall's tone suddenly became a little angry. He grabbed Asano Akira's shoulder, but the latter suddenly ducked and dodged. Asano Akira began to run forward, but at this moment, he felt that the air around him seemed to have solidified, and every step forward had to endure unimaginable resistance. Base. This time, the sword was really unsheathed. Akira Asano swung the sword, thinking of slashing it in front of him. Stab! A tooth-piercing friction sound hit his eardrum, and he could clearly feel the blade cutting something, and the feeling of blockage was immediately reduced by half. This is not an illusion, this resistance is real. P.S. Thanks to Renja 12,315 for the 5,000 starting coins, thank you for the 1,500 starting coins, and thank you Wei Wang Hai Linyi and Book Friend 2020072201263284 for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 398. You succeeded. Although Asano Akira rarely showed his inner emotions on weekdays, at this time, his face showed completely uncontrollable horror. Well, judging by the standards set by those people, I have indeed reached that level. Marshall did not deny it, so, you can't beat me. Put your knife back, turn around, and leave this place. By the end of the sentence, Marshall's tone had become extremely stern, like a squad leader ordering his recruits. In that experimental unit, Marshall was the squad leader of Akira Asano's squad. Although they are just a group of experimental subjects like mice, in order to facilitate the handling of the aftermath, each of them has joined the military, and the formations are also divided according to the military's organizational structure. There are a total of 16 classes in the experimental force, and Marshall's class is the 16th, which is the weakest one. The weakest ones are naturally the ones who are bullied the most. In the experimental base, that is, where their unit is stationed, although they are strictly prohibited from using special abilities in private, fighting is not prohibited. As long as no one is killed or maimed, the managers will not intervene in the private conflicts between the experimental subjects, they will only stare at the numbers on the sensors. If anyone uses the power gained in the experiment without permission, they will press the button, and the collar around the subject's neck will release a high-voltage current that is enough to cause instant shock. At that time, Asano Akira was not only at the bottom in terms of ability, but also in terms of physical fitness. In the first 3 months of participating in the experimental project, he failed the physical examination once. If his consciousness hadn't been able to react to the equipment dug out from the ruins of the Alpha civilization, he would have been kicked out long ago. Out of the list. In the first 3 months, he was beaten no less than 50 times in the recruit company. There were often bruises at the corners of his eyes, and the large and small scars on his body never healed, no matter how high they were. Loading training or tests related to experiments are an unbearable torture for everyone in the recruit company. However, with the support of special food and medicine, despite their immense inner pain, their physical strength will hardly be exhausted. In this way, violence has naturally become the best way for these experimental subjects to vent their repressed emotions. It was not until 3 months later that the experimental subjects in the recruit company passed the first round of screening. The eliminated ones were sent away from the base, and those who remained were assigned to various observation units based on squads. Group. Akira Asano was assigned to Class 16. When he went to the dormitory of Class 16 with his personal belongings to report, He happened to encounter people from Class 12 and Class 13 who came to pick a fight. The cause was just a quarrel in the cafeteria, but somehow, the matter expanded into the level of gang fighting. The people from Class 12 and Class 13 carried folding chairs and the legs of camp beds to block the dormitory door of Class 16. The arrival of Asano Akira immediately attracted their attention. "Who is your kid?" a person from Class 12 asked viciously. "A new member of Class 16, Akira Asano, has been ordered to report." This guy is from Class 16, beat him up too." The man was stunned for a moment, then picked up the guy in his hand and rushed towards Asano Akira, but at this moment, Marshall was alone. He crashed out of the dormitory, knocking over several people who were blocking him along the way, then grabbed the guy who wanted to attack Akira Asano, picked him up, and threw him to the side. "Newcomer, listen up, hold your head, lower your head, and look in the direction of the dormitory door. I will help you get rid of the other people. Don't worry about anything, just keep running forward. Now, rush." That was the first thing Marshall said to Asano Akira, and the tone was almost exactly the same as at this time. "What, do you really want to be my enemy?" Akira Asano did not answer, but struck out with the knife again, splitting the air that was entangled again around him. He knew that those things were not actually air, but Marshall's nearly substantial ideas. Although the experimental base was originally established to study this thing, the substantial idea was only theoretical. Until the experimental base was cancelled, no one could reach this level. "You guy! Are you looking for death?" Marshall shouted angrily, and several invisible big hands instantly appeared next to Asano Akira. 2 hands grabbed his wrists, and 2 hands grabbed his ankles. And 2 hands, firmly holding his shoulder blades. "You idiot!" Akira Asano couldn't help but groan as he felt his lower abdomen was punched hard. In fact, when the two met for the first time, Asano Akira did not obey Marshall's order. He dropped the quilt he was holding, and then followed Marshall towards the people of Class 12 and Class 13. "Idiot! Trash! Damn!" Every time Marshall cursed, he would throw an invisible punch at Asano Akira. "If you don't obey, you will be beaten. If you refuse to give up, then I will beat you alive today. Die here. Even if I beat you to death, I don't want to watch you enter the Holy Land." Marshall continued, "You choose for yourself, give up, or die in my hands." Akira Asano didn't answer. He suddenly threw the sword in his hand upwards, stretched out his neck, and bit the handle of the sword with his teeth. He turned his head vigorously and cut off the invisible hands that were restraining him with a swift half-arc slash. The sword returned to his hand again, and he quickly took a dozen steps back, keeping distance from Marshall. He remembered that in the related theory of substantialization of thought power, even if someone really reaches this almost impossible level, then this ability is also limited by distance. The further away from the person, the farther the thought will be. The harder it is to condense into an entity. And after exceeding a certain range, this idea will even dissipate directly. Those experimenters call this range the absolute control field, which means that a person with this ability has absolute control within this range. In the absolute control field, he is nearly invincible. The existence of, even the bullets shot into this field, he can stop them with his thoughts. No one can defeat him in the absolute control field. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 399. Although there has never been an individual who can materialize thoughts in the experimental base, researchers have used supercomputers to simulate this state, based on the data of a large number of real-life experimental subjects, with the help of the huge computing power of supercomputers. By deducing their own strength, they created a hypothetical experimental body. This is an experimental body with a perfect state and is also the ultimate goal set at the beginning of the experimental project. In that virtual test program, the researchers placed this perfect individual in an open space without a bunker. They first arranged a circle of 12-point caliber vehicle-mounted heavy machine guns around the experimental target, and simultaneously fired shots at it. Shooting. As expected from the beginning, before the mental power of the perfect individual was exhausted, he stopped every bullet fired at him. He even had the power to change the trajectory of the bullet and turn around and destroy those machine guns that shoot out bullets. Then, researchers continued to add more and more lethal weapons, from conventional howitzers and Gauss sniper rifles to cluster laser cannons, heavy rail guns, and even napalm bombs, etc. Unless through consumption to drag the experimental target until the oil is exhausted, otherwise no weapon can hurt him. He can use his mind to create a force field that cannot be observed with the naked eye. This position can not only block physical cannonballs, but can even isolate radiation, high temperature, and poisonous gas. Even high-power laser beams will be distorted and deflected when they are shot at it. To destroy this force field instantly, you must use at least tactical-grade small nuclear weapons, or simply bring in a plasma cannon, a battleship main gun-grade weapon. However, this method of destruction is essentially consumption. Even a perfect individual will have his mental energy drained quickly when faced with a weapon of this level. It looks like a nuclear bomb has exploded the mental force field. In fact, the experimental subject's mental strength is not enough to support this kind of consumption. In principle, it is somewhat similar to the defense mechanism of Alpha Civilization's energy shield. However, the shield generator still has a limit on the rated power, but the thought force field does not seem to have such a limit. Assuming that this perfect individual has an infinite spirit, then in a sense, he is invincible. It is for this reason that researchers have named this position the domain of absolute control. However, in subsequent experiments, the researchers discovered that the absolute control field is not absolute. There is a way to break it. Of course, using the word break may seem a little inaccurate, and it is more rigorous. The term should be neutralization. Ideas from another subject, even if this subject is not a perfect individual, can neutralize this field of absolute control. For example, suppose there is an experimental subject with the ability to attach his thoughts to a bullet, then the materialized thoughts in the absolute control field will be neutralized by the thoughts attached to the bullet. This bullet will hit the perfect individual unhindered, rather than being blocked by the invisible position. The reason why Asano Akira's sword was able to cut through those invisible hands just now was entirely because the blade was covered with his idea power. The biggest nemesis of the perfect individual is his own kind. However, experimental subjects who can attach their thoughts to bullets are rare. Asano Akira remembers clearly that in that experimental unit, there were people who could be attached to objects that were not in direct contact with themselves. There will not be more than 3 people in total. As for himself, as long as the sword is released, the thought attached to it will quickly dissipate. As long as this thought can be retained for more than 0.1 seconds, he can be ranked in the top 10 among all experimental subjects. You should be very clear about the strength gap between the perfect individual and you now, right? Marshall did not pursue him, but said to Asano Akira from a distance, "If you turn your head now, I can still let you leave here." Keilan came to this place to help me, Asano Akira said. I can't leave him alone. Then he can only blame his bad luck. First he was selected by the servant of God, and then he broke into the Holy Land. To be honest, if he had accepted the baptism ceremony obediently, things would not have developed to this point. Taking a step back, even if he refused the baptism and killed the servant of God, as long as he could stop here, there would still be room for change in the whole matter. But now, since he has stepped into Holy Land, then there is no room for redemption. Marshall paused, and then said in a slightly lower voice, "To tell you the truth, I came out of that place. I know very well what he will encounter inside." "What exactly is in the Holy Land?" Akira Asano asked. "I can't tell you." Marshall shook his head, and then sighed. "Do you know what I hate most about you? You are too easy to trust others. Do you really think that this person named Keilan is here? Did he come to this place just to help you find someone? How are you sure he has no other purpose? If there is no other purpose, why would he follow the servant of God to the residence of God, and why would he poison the great God? Poison? Asano Akira was stunned. What do you mean? That's the literal meaning, Marshall said, suddenly taking a step forward. Okay, I have told you enough. If it were anyone else, you would have been killed long ago. What is the great God? You don't need to know, Marshall said. Anyway, your purpose of coming here has been achieved, so get out of here. Last question, why can you enter the Holy Land, but Kaylan and I can't? I call you an idiot, but you really are an idiot. Marshall suddenly accelerated and rushed towards Asano Akira, because very few people who go in can come out alive. As he spoke, he raised his hand towards Asano Akira from a distance of several meters. At the same time, a large hand invisible to the naked eye instantly condensed and formed directly above Asano Akira, carrying strong wind pressure. Photographed. Shua. The light of the knife flashed, the sharp edge sliced open the big hand, and the condensed thoughts disappeared. Are you really planning to become my enemy for that guy? Marshall's words were filled with anger. You're not even sure if he's using you. I'm sure, Akira Asano replied while waving the knife. He didn't take advantage of me. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 400. Are you sure? Why are you sure? Marshall asked back. He kept approaching Asano Akira, trying to use his absolute control area to envelope Asano Akira, while the latter kept waving the sword in his hand to destroy those. The invisible hand cuts them off one by one, fighting and retreating. Although Asano Akira cannot see, he can clearly feel those substantive thoughts. In this battle, blindness not only did not bring any negative effects, but also allowed him to have no distracting thoughts and concentrate on all the thoughts. Akira Asano remembered that when he was describing this ability to Kaylan named it Mind's Eye. When he has nothing to do, Kaylan will sometimes come to chat with him. Although the chat process is basically Kaylan talking a lot, Asano Akira will respond with a short sentence, or simply a few words. But he remembered everything Kaylan said. His past life was very monotonous. After his parents were exiled, he spent his childhood relying on the subsistence allowance provided by ARC. And after joining this experimental project and becoming an experimental subject, the days living in a closed experimental base became even more boring. Even if he regained his freedom later, he would no longer take the initiative to care after he was used to this kind of life. Things that have nothing to do with survival. Excluding the time for eating, sleeping and going out to perform tasks, Asano Akira spent most of his spare time holding his sword in a daze, or practicing swordplay in his room. His residence was very empty. Apart from the bathroom that was simply separated by a curtain, the only piece of furniture in the whole room was the bed in the corner. There was no table, stove, or cooking utensils in the room, not even bowls. He never cooks or orders takeout. Under his bed, there are several boxes of military compressed biscuits that do not need to be cooked. Pill bottles containing vitamin supplements and large bottles of drinking purified water are piled in the corner. Asano Akira has been eating these foods for several years. As for other foods, he has never tried them. No wonder the Hound was so surprised when he was in the bottomless sinkhole. You are a Japanese, but you have never eaten Japanese food. Although he became a relic hunter, Asano Akira took on missions very rarely. Apart from paying for the use of his residence and buying daily necessities, he had no need to spend money at all, and he only had to spend money when he was about to finish the compressed cookies. When the time comes, he will take on new tasks. Until he received the mission to explore the glacier ruins. A group of people broke into his life. Akira Asano remembers clearly that after the Leviathan incident, Kaylan talked about his abilities in a casual chat. He said that in the old era, there used to be a very popular online game called Underground City and Warrior. There is a profession in it called Azura, which is very similar to myself. Asano Akira didn't know what an underground city was. Literally speaking, it should be a city built underground, which should be similar to some of the ruins of Alpha civilization. Kaylan said that the Azuras in the game are a group of blind swordsmen. They voluntarily gave up their eyes and instead used something called waves to perceive the world. This perception ability was called the mind's eye. It's exactly the same, Kaylan said, speaking of which, isn't the power of mind similar to the wave power in the game? I don't know, what is the power of fluctuation, Asano Akira replied. I don't know how to describe it. It's probably a force invisible to the naked eye, right? For example, a gust of wind blows on your face. You can't see the flowing air, but the skin and muscles on your face, but you can feel its presence. Asano Akira imagined that feeling, and then told Kaylan that until the experimental project was stopped, no one could achieve this level. Substantiating ideas is a concept that can only appear in the imaginary program of a supercomputer. But now, a living perfect individual is standing in front of Asano Akira, and is constantly attacking him. Akira Asano can see the substantial thoughts flowing around Marshall. These things are as surging as the ocean, and they can condense powerful and swift attack moves at any time, but the limit of what he can do is only he just attached a very small amount of his thoughts to the blade and kept slashing, as if he was using runoff as thin as a finger to cut off the huge tide pouring down. The gap in power is already large enough to be described by the word disparity. Asano Akira kept retreating. He had been forced into a dead end by Marshall, with messy scaffolding blocking his way. You give up now, give up, or I won't kill you. Marshall walked towards him leisurely, with his hands in his pockets. With just a thought, there would be waves of rapid attacks on him. Akira Asano. Faced with such an offensive, Asano Akira had to mobilize all his strength to fight. He had almost reached his limit, and the sweat oozing out had already soaked through the clothes on his back. You can't win, Marshall continued, those people are right. Only the power of another experimental subject's mind can break through the absolute control field of the perfect individual, but the converse is also the same. I want to. It takes no effort at all to swallow up your meager thoughts. Don't you understand yet? Your chance of winning is 0. Area F, the residence of God, the Holy Land. Kaylan carefully passed through the hatchery of fleshy cocoons and continued walking deeper into Area F. He was a little curious. If the wall of flesh and blood was the great god believed by the followers of the Sick Village sect, then what should be behind this wall? Just like playing a video game, if the great god is the final boss of this copy of the Sick Village, then why is there such a large space behind the final boss? Moreover, the wall of flesh has absolutely no characteristics that the final boss should have. For some reason, Kaylan not only didn't find this guy scary, but actually found him a bit silly. Rather than saying it is a great god, Kaylan thinks it is more like a symbol, an idol worshipped by the residents of the Sick Village. Then this idol also took on the task of producing the elite monsters in the copy. Kaylan felt that if he were the designer of this dungeon, he would never make the wall of flesh and blood the final boss of the dungeon. On the surface, the wall of flesh and blood is already the end of the dungeon, but in fact, after climbing over this dungeon, after blocking the wall, there should be a more powerful hidden boss behind it. This hidden boss is the real controller of this space station. P.S. Thanks to Quantu and Book Friend 2020722012632843 for the 500 starting coins, and thanks to Mingmuar for the 200 starting coins. PPS. Let's do a little research regarding the insertion of memory plots of various supporting characters in subsequent plots to further improve their backgrounds and characters. Do you think this writing method is suspicious of a water chapter? Is it better to write it this way or just put it in the extra chapter? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 401. This made Kaylan couldn't help but think of Catholicism in the old era. In the Middle Ages, this was the era when Catholicism had the strongest control over the entire continent of Europe. At that time, the Church represented the supreme authority. The Church not only had the power to crown emperors, but also had the qualifications to declare heretics. Everything they did, even launching wars, burning, killing and looting, could be covered with a high-sounding crown. The reason, this is the will given by God, and the Church is just the agent of God in the world. In that ignorant era, few people doubted the existence of God. Even if they did, they would be labeled as heresies by the Church and sentenced to death. But as the wheel of history rolls forward, more and more people realize that God does not exist at all. Since he does not exist, then whose mouth does the so-called will granted by God come from? For most religions, God is actually just a symbol, and those who call themselves God's agents are the ones who truly hold power. They created a fictitious idol, but announced to the world that this world was created by this fictitious idol. Now it seems that it is simply a big joke. Although for the Sikh village sect, the great God they believe in and worship is real, in K. Ian's view, this wall of flesh and blood called God can only be regarded as a puppet. A puppet with the incubation ability. Looking back on what happened before, Kaylan always felt that there were unreasonable places everywhere, and the most unreasonable place among them was the wall of flesh and blood itself. The wall of flesh and blood cannot speak and cannot communicate with people. It is difficult for Kaylan to even determine whether it has complete self-awareness. For such an existence, no matter how powerful it is impossible to survive in a short time just by strength alone. In just a few decades, he became the great God in the eyes of the Sikh village residents. From the day the word God was born, it should be an existence that is high and difficult for mortals to touch, and for a thing that is visible and tangible, no matter how much people revere it, it is impossible to place it on such a high position. All of this is the result of human manipulation. Without the deliberate guidance of someone with a heart, even in another 100 years, the Sikh village sect may not be born in this isolated suspended prison. Kaylan even suspected that the wall of flesh was not wild but was also manufactured, just like people in the old era used clay and marble to create statues of gods that did not exist in reality. But the only difference is, it's alive. Someone pushed it out and used it as an idol on the surface, while its creator was hidden behind the wall. The behind the wall is a pun, which refers to the person who put his identity and means behind the wall. Hidden behind a symbol such as the wall of flesh and blood, it also refers to himself, perhaps hiding in the space behind the wall of flesh and blood. This area obviously has a very special meaning to the people of the heretical sect, otherwise, they would not have stopped pursuing Kaylan after he crossed the wall of flesh and blood. The hatchery only occupies a very small part of the space behind the wall. A very exciting speculation. A strange voice suddenly sounded in K. Ian's head. I have to admit that you almost guessed most of the truth correctly, and as for some deviations in details, it is not harmful. Who are you? Kaylan was startled by the voice, raised the axe in his hand, and looked around warily. I am the man behind the scenes, as you guessed, the real controller of this Sikh village, the voice said again. Can you read my thoughts? Kaylan secretly thought something bad. If this was the case, wouldn't he be completely transparent to this person? Then in front of this person, his secret would be invisible. He couldn't help but feel a fear that had never appeared before. He felt as if he was tied to an anatomy table. A sharp circular saw cut open the skull along the eyebrows. The steaming brain was taken out by a pair of hands covered with sterile gloves and placed on top of a table filled with electrodes. The precision laser cutting machine operated steadily and quickly, cutting his body into countless thin slices not even a millimeter thick, and his brain was connected to a biological computer, and all his thoughts, consciousness, and memory are like data stored on a disk, being decrypted one by one for people to browse at will. It's funny what you imagine, but they don't have to do it. Even these things can be spied on. Kaylan gritted his teeth unwillingly. He simply stopped thinking about anything, closed his eyes, and forced himself into a state similar to meditation. "Oh? Do you want to stop thinking to resist my prying eyes?" There seemed to be a sarcastic smile in the voice, "but what you abandon is just distracting thoughts. As long as your brain is still functioning, it is impossible to stop thinking. Down. Instead of doing this useless work, you might as well chat with me for a while," the other party said suddenly. "Chat? You can clearly see what I'm thinking in my head, so what's there to talk about?" Kaylan asked. "Although I can read your past memories and spy on your current thinking, I cannot predict the thoughts that have not yet been born in your mind. Things in the future are uncertain, just like the famous Schrödinger's like a cat, it is always unknowable until it is observed." Kaylan wanted to refute him, but found that he couldn't find anything to refute. "Go forward 272 meters, turn left, enter the third airtight door from the right, go straight for another 100 meters, pass through the fire escape, and you will be in front of me." A trap, this was Ian's first reaction, but he quickly rejected the idea. Since the other party can understand his thinking, why use traps to deal with him? Kaylan found with some sadness that if this voice wanted to be his enemy, he had no chance of winning. Following the route the other party told him, Kaylan walked to the end of the fire escape. In front of him was a thick airtight door. The paint on the door had completely peeled off, and the exposed alloy surface covered the door. A gray-white oxide layer, this door is not covered by those fleshy films, and it looks particularly conspicuous among a large area of dark red. Kaylan took a deep breath, grabbed the valve on the airtight door, and turned it hard. Creak. With a tooth-gripping sound, the airtight door was slowly pushed open by him. Behind the door is a circular hall, with many mechanical arms of different specifications hanging from the top of the hall, but now these mechanical arms have been wrapped in fleshy membranes, looking like the limbs of biochemical monsters. In the center of the hall, there is a cone-shaped meat mountain piled up, and on the top of the meat mountain is a human body. To be precise, half a body. It was a bloated man whose upper body was covered with clear polymer tubes that extended all the way to the floor. His lower body is integrated with this giant mountain of meat that is more than 10 meters high. On the waist and abdomen, the traces left by surgical sutures can still be vaguely seen. Kaylan shifted her gaze to his face. This man only has half a face. The area below the root of the nose has disappeared. A large amount of proliferative tissue has filled the gap on the lower side of the facial bones. Many blood vessels, nerves, and fascia that should not appear in normal humans tightly wrap the back spine, extending to the depths of the skull, beyond the reach of Ian's vision. Please allow me to formally introduce myself. As you may have guessed, my identity is the Pope of this fictional religion, the creator of the Wall of Flesh, the actual controller of the sick village. Of course, I wouldn't mind if you called me by another name, Chiron. Pope, Chiron. Kaylan suddenly had a very strange feeling. Wait a minute, Chiron, is he the centaur Chiron in ancient Greek mythology? The one who later became Sagittarius? Exactly, that's where my name comes from. The Pope, the fifth card of the major arcana. The god, represented by the Pope, happens to be the High Priest Chiron. Are you a member of the undead crew? The fifth seat, the Pope Chiron. Kaylan couldn't help but widen his eyes. This was the first time he saw the true form of a member of the Immortal Member Association. It used to be, Chiron said, but I made a mistake, a very serious mistake. Because of this incident, I was expelled from the Undead Crew Club and exiled to this custom built for me. In prison. A prison tailor-made for you. Kaylan was stunned. The purpose of building this space station is not. You are right, but this is only one of the purposes. Although I have been exiled here, I am still working for the Ark to make up for my mistakes and atone for my crimes. Kaylan looked up at Chiron, who was a little surprised and speechless. Man is right about what he said to you. The experimental project was not suspended, it was just changed to a different form, and I took over. This space station is not just my prison, nor is it just a shelter for those miners. It is also a research institute that is not subject to the laws of the Ark. It has never been abandoned, it has been functioning since its construction until now. Then, those miners. Yes, they are all experimental subjects. In essence, they are the same as Asano Akira at this point. Chiron's voice suddenly stopped. After a few seconds, he continued, "It seems, you are not the only uninvited guest here today." "I'm not the only one." Kaylan was startled and turned around quickly, only to find a figure quietly walking out of the fire escape he had passed through before. "It's the missionary from the remaining heretical sect." Chiron let out a dry laugh. "It's really interesting that the only two people can actually meet here." "The only two people?" Kaylan repeated Chiron's words with some confusion, then pointed the fire axe in his hand at the missionary and asked, "Who are you? How did you get in?" "Who am I? A good question." A weird smile appeared on the missionary's face, "but I don't want to answer your question. If you want to know the answer, you can ask this pile of rotten meat. He will tell you." But before Kaylan could speak, the missionary continued, "You shouldn't be hostile to me. You and I are of the same kind, and we are the only ones of the same kind in the world." The first half of what he said was in Chinese, and the second half was the language of Alpha civilization. Kaylan couldn't help but hold his breath. "You guessed it right again." Chiron's voice rang in Kayan's consciousness. "He is the founder of the heretical section. He and you are the only ones among all humans who have mastered the Alpha language." "I don't like this statement." The founder of the heretical sect frowned and looked at Chiron on the mountain of meat with disgust. "Don't use the term human to describe me. I am no longer that ignorant. An inferior creature." As he was talking, he suddenly looked at Kaylan. "Don't you think this guy is hypocritical? Even though it has given up its human form, it still uses this disgusting term to define people like us who are far better than it. A more excellent existence. What is this? Is it possible that it is jealous of us? Ha 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 ha." His tone was so crazy that he laughed so loudly that he even bent over and lay on the ground, pounding the floor with his fists. "Ha ha 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 ha, Kaylan, can you imagine? A caterpillar that failed to transform into a butterfly uses the word bug to describe a human being. Ha 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 ha, this is really funny. To be honest, I can't understand what's so funny about you." Kaylan thought for a while and then said seriously, "Is it possible that you still think you are human?" The man stopped laughing, looked at Kaylan, and asked with some surprise, "I'm not a human being, what else can I be?" "A monster," Kaylan asked. "How can you be a monster? Just like you and me, we are gods. Besides gods, what other existence can have such power?" "Sorry, I'm an atheist," Kaylan said. "Don't you want to become a god?" The man stared at Kayan's eyes. "Eternal life, strength, authority, knowledge, no one can refuse these four things. Hearing the truth in the morning, at night you can die. Some people spend their whole lives just to touch the truth for a moment, and if you become a god, you will have these things forever." "You are crazy, and not a little crazy," Kaylan said. "Desire, this is desire. Desire is the instinct of living things. Without desire, the existence of life is meaningless." The man pointed at Chiron and continued to say to Kaylan, "The existence of the immortal crew is human desire. The products of, it's just that their desires are small and dirty, they are like rats in the sewer, and their ultimate goal in life is just a piece of rancid and moldy cheese." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 402. "But we are different." His tone rose several times. "We are not rats, we are the chosen ones. We hold the key to a higher class. Unlike them, they can only stay in the dark and damp sewers forever. Inside." With a fanatical look on his face, he raised his hands above his head, his fingers spread angrily, and he waved his arms vigorously. "Do you understand? I, and you, we, are the future of this lower race of mankind. He continued, the so-called civilization is just a ridiculous playhouse. This universe is essentially the same as the inaccessible primitive jungle on the earth. The law of the jungle is the only rule in this world. This world is inherently cruel. Every civilization needs to continue to grow and expand, but the total amount of resources in the universe is constant. If you want civilization to survive, the only way is to make yourself stronger. It's time to go. He put down his arms and took a breath. Kaylan, do you think that with the current strength of human beings, we can compete with other civilizations in this universe? Too slow. Both the development of technology and the evolution of human beings are too slow. They can't even communicate effectively with other civilizations, so how can they guarantee that other civilizations will show mercy to humans? Without power, everything is just a bunch of bubbles that burst. Other civilizations will not reason with humans. Once humans are discovered by other civilizations, the only thing waiting for humans is enslavement, or complete destruction. Don't expect negotiations. Negotiations and agreements only exist between equal civilizations. Just imagine, will humans agree to sign a pig rights convention with livestock in pig farms? Humanity is doomed. And we will create a new civilization that is countless times more powerful than humans. Pa. Pa. Pa Kaylan clapped his hands expressionlessly. It's a wonderful speech, but it's not attractive or convincing to me. Why? The man looked at Kaylan, with a hint of anger in his eyebrows. There is a fatal flaw in your speech, didn't you find it? Kaylan shrugged, sat down on the ground and crossed his legs. At this time, the fleshy membrane on the ground rose in time. There was a bulge like the back of a chair, allowing Kaylan to lean his back on it. Thank you. Kaylan nodded slightly to Chiron, then turned his attention back to that man. You keep saying you want to become a god, but so far, you have only created a character that makes those idiots. Besides worshipping the false gods, what else have you done? If nothing else, Kaylan continued, you said that you can create a powerful new civilization, a new civilization that can survive the collision of civilizations in the universe. Well, I am confused. What are you? Where do you get the courage to say such things? Is it the courage that Liang Jingru lent you? I know you must be curious about who Liang Jingru is, but I also know that with your identity, you must be embarrassed to ask, so why don't I take the initiative to tell you that this is a pop music from the old era? I have no interest in this person. If you want to refute my point of view, don't use these rubbish words to prevaricate me. The man interrupted Ian's introduction very unhappily. Okay, let's get back to the topic. Kaylan waved his hand. You said that you and I are the same kind, then I will use my own abilities as a reference. Kaylan didn't hide anything. Anyway, with Chiron here, his secrets were almost all transparent, and as the founder of the heretical sect, the other party must also know everything about his abilities. First of all, you and I, we both have mastered the language of Alpha civilization. Although we are the only two people among tens of millions of humans who have mastered this foreign language, for Alpha civilization, language can only be regarded as basic survival skills, right? And you also said that in the war between civilizations, language is of no use at all, and it is impossible for others to not destroy you just because you are a civilization who writes very good poems and songs. Right. So, language ability can basically be ignored. Secondly, it's about, oh, by the way, as the leader of a heretical sect, I want to ask you first, how much do you know about the thing you dug out of Manstein's belly? That is a very special crystal, and it even has the ability to interfere with time and space. The man stared at Kaylan and said, we originally planned to integrate it into a semi-finished product left over from the Alpha civilization, but I didn't expect that you would ruin things and even take away my things. Oh, you know this, Kaylan pretended to be a little nervous. I thought I almost let it slip. Since you know that the things are with me, I don't have any worries. This thing is quite magical. Not only can it interfere with time and space, it can even modify the human body to a certain extent. If it were placed in an MMORPG game, it would have to be a golden legendary treasure, but, if you use this thing as a bargaining chip to measure the goal of your speech just now, then my only basis for this is two words. Kaylan showed a mean smile and tilted his head. That's it? That's it, the man repeated what Kaylan said. What do you mean? Whether it's the semi-finished product or this magical crystal of legendary quality, or even those powerful prehistoric species, these things are all creations of the Alpha civilization, right? Kaylan said, but, even the Alpha civilization that created these things has died, so why do you have the arrogance to say these things? You are like those small countries in the old era. They emptied their pockets and asked neighboring countries to buy a few junk planes that others had retired. You don't know how high-minded you are and want to quarrel with the world hegemon. You are even stupider than such a small country. At least on Earth, those big countries are forced by the pressure of public opinion and will not destroy such small countries just because of these few words. But in the war between civilizations, those who jump like you will probably only die. It has to be earlier, right? Ignorance, the man seemed to have been hurt by Kaylan. He pointed directly at Kaylan and cursed, you can stand on the side of these lower races. Time will prove which of us is right. It's just a pity that you two may not see that day. At the same time as he said these words, countless black tentacles pierced the skin of his right arm and grew out. These tentacles wrapped around together, it enveloped his entire right arm, eventually forming a conical weapon shaped like a spear. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 403. Are you being reasonable, but are you ready to take action? Although Kaylan was still teasing him, he had already grabbed the fire axe in his right hand and stood up from the ground. Originally, my goal was just this pile of rotten meat, but since you don't agree with my point of view, then you will die with this pile of rotten meat, the man said coldly. Hey, Mr. Pope, can you beat him? Kaylan looked at Chiron and asked. But Chiron did not directly answer Ian's question. A helpless bitter laughter sounded in the heads of Kaylan and the founder of the heretical sect at the same time. I know what your purpose is here, but unfortunately, you are late, Chiron said. Although Kaylan could also hear it, he knew that Chiron's words were meant for that guy. In the blink of an eye, a vertical gap appeared on the huge mountain of meat, and the gap began to expand continuously. It was like a conical rice dumpling buckled on the table, which had been cut vertically, and then cut along the. It was as if it was being opened to both sides with the knife marks. The scene inside the meat mountain gradually appeared in front of Kaylan and the two of them. Kaylan did not see the bloody tissues and organs as he imagined. This huge mountain of flesh was actually empty inside. To be precise, it was a living rotten empty thing. The inner wall of the meat mountain is full of traces of scorched blackness and necrosis. Just like the tentacle that absorbed Ian's blood, the entire meat mountain is constantly rotting from the inside out, and the withered flesh and blood turns into flocculent. The bits and pieces are constantly peeling off the inner wall. Judging from the current speed, the process of necrosis and corruption within Roshan has probably started a few months ago. How could this happen? How could this happen? Compared with Kaylan, the leader of the heretical sect seemed even more surprised. He stared blankly at the inside of Roshan and murmured. What's wrong with him? Isn't he going to kill both of us? Why does he seem so disappointed when he sees you in this state? Kaylan asked Chiron. Because his real goal is not my life, killing me is just a matter of course, Chiron said lightly. As for what he originally wanted, you saw that it is gone. What he originally wanted? Was it something from the meat mountain? Could it be some living organ? Kaylan muttered. It's my heart. Of course, this does not refer to the corresponding organ of the same name in the human body. It's just that to me, that thing is as important as the heart, and it is precisely on this heart I can have such a long life. The members of the Immortal Crew Association, are they really immortal? Kaylan was stunned and asked this question that had been bothering him for a long time. Of course not, Chiron replied, it's just that our lifespans are much longer than ordinary people. It's so long that I'm starting to get tired of this feeling. Maybe I shouldn't have joined the crew in the first place. Just like ordinary people spend decades of life, and then die quietly, this ending is actually quite good. But, everything is finally coming to an end. Before I die completely, I can still find someone to chat with, and even watch a wonderful debate. I am already very satisfied, Chiron continued. Why would you? Kaylan pointed to the empty interior of the meat mountain. It became like this. However, before Chiron had time to answer, the leader of the heretical sect let out a hysterical roar and rushed towards the meat mountain crazily. Heart. Where's your heart? He roared. Why do you want to destroy it? Apart from it, you are just a pile of worthless rotten meat. How dare you destroy your own heart, just to let can't I get it? Countless tentacles rose from the fleshy membrane on the ground and wound towards him, but before these tentacles could touch his body, the black spear had already cut off all those close to him. Tentacle. The black spear, which is also made of tentacles, is conical in shape. Except for the sharp tip, the other parts have no edges, but the tentacles that are close to it seem to have been cut off by sharp blades, and the fractures are smooth. Smooth, without even a trace of wrinkles caused by extrusion. After Kaylan spent some time, he discovered that every time the black spear was swung out, the black tentacles that made up the main body of the spear would undergo some subtle changes. They extended from the cone-shaped cylinder and connected it becomes a blade with a flat and sharp edge. After completing the cutting, it will quickly retract into the spear body. The whole process takes less than tenths of a second. When observed with the naked eye, it looks like these tentacles. It's like being cut by a smooth tapered cylinder. Seeing that this offensive was ineffective, Chiron raised dozens of flesh walls made of solid body tissue around him. There were more than 10 flesh walls in each direction, and each wall had nearly half a meter thick, tightly surrounding him inside. In order to prevent him from breaking through directly above, the height of these flesh walls continued to rise. The innermost flesh walls even began to get closer to each other, and then connected together, forming a square bowl that was upside down on the ground. However, the opponent seems to have no intention of breaking through from above. Kaylan only heard a series of dull sounds like tearing silk from inside the square bowl. In the blink of an eye, the man had already torn open the outermost layer of flesh wall with a black spear and continued to move towards Chiron. Rush away. The strength this guy is showing now is already a lot stronger than Asano Akira. As far as the back of the chair Kaylan just leaned on, although these walls of flesh were all in a very short period of time, it was spawned from within, but its toughness is no less than the wall of flesh and blood outside that is regarded as the great god by the residents of the sick village. Even the bullets of the gauze rifle are difficult to hit this thing. Wear it, but in front of this person, these dozens of walls of flesh seem to be made of paper. No. Even if it is a paper wall, if it can be half a meter thick, it will not be pierced easily, at least with Ian's strength. He cannot use a spear without the help of external force. It pierced a half-meter thick pile of paper in one go. What's more, he pierced more than a dozen piles in a row. The man had already rushed in front of the meat mountain, but just when he was about to step onto the meat mountain, he seemed to be hit by something. He flew out instantly and fell heavily to the ground. What happened? Kaylan stared in surprise. He had just activated time stop, but he still didn't catch anything. What on earth knocked that guy away? Is it Chiron? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 405. Who is it? The leader of the heretical sect got up from the ground with some difficulty. Only then did Kaylan notice that there were more than a dozen bloody holes in his body. Although in less than 2 seconds, these blood holes were filled up with the crazy growth of flesh sprouts, judging from his extremely pale face, it was obvious that he had been severely injured. Chiron. That's not your ability, he roared in shock and anger, there is a fourth person here. Come out. How is it? How does it feel to be defeated by something you created? Chiron said, with a hint of smile in his tone. The thing that was created by oneself. The man was stunned for a moment, then looked around in disbelief. Is it the half-finished product? Is she still alive? This is impossible. That semi-finished product, Kaylan was also a little confused after hearing the word. It wasn't because he didn't know what the semi-finished product referred to, on the contrary, it was because he knew that he was shocked. Just now, Kaylan mentioned this thing in the conversation with that person. Although neither party explained it, everyone present knew that the semi-finished product naturally refers to the iron body that was on the top floor of Arezaka Tower. Something in a virgin. In order to destroy that thing, the undead crew even abandoned the entire East 9 District module. Logically speaking, that thing should have died under the bombardment of the Ark's main cannon. Is it still alive? Kaylan remembered the nightmare he had had during the mecha competition, and the erratic coordinates. That's all true. Although Kaylan didn't know how that thing affected his dreams, it was no longer important. It's not that Kaylan has never wanted to find out more about this coordinate, but he also knows the risks involved, but now, before he has made any preparations, he has to face the call in his dream. Source of sound. It really caught people off guard, Kaylan said with a helpless smile. She is indeed still alive, Chiron's voice rang in Kayan's mind. In the few seconds before the East 9 District module was completely destroyed, she had already broken free from the altar built by the 6 warriors, thereby avoiding main gun lock-on. Is the thing in the Iron Maiden here now? Kaylan asked quickly. Chiron did not answer his question directly, but continued the topic just now. Although she is only a semi-finished product, compared with that inferior mass-produced biological weapon, the completion level of the two is completely different. Level, although she was affected by the aftermath of the Ark's main gun, not only did she not die, but she also used this opportunity to complete a transformation. Inferior mass-produced biological weapons, could they refer to seeds of erosion? Kaylan clearly remembered that in those memory fragments, it was clearly recorded that the seeds of erosion could not survive in a vacuum environment for a long time. So, it seems that this semi-finished product can survive in space? However, Kaylan can still accept this. As long as the physical strength of the creature itself is sufficient, survival in space is not a particularly powerful thing. Let alone the existence of the prehistoric species that subverts common sense. Even those who besieged them at the beginning, the pioneer icebreakers, deep-sea giant eels, can do it. The Institute once captured an immature deep-sea giant eel. In order to explore the adaptability limit of this creature, in the final stage of the experiment, they directly used an airship to send the deep-sea giant eel outside the atmosphere, and then sent it thrown out of the cabin in the vacuum, extremely cold, and radiation-filled space environment. The giant deep-sea eel lived for a full week before its brain stopped functioning. Even so, when its brain was declared dead, most of the organs in the body still maintained normal operation. She drifted in the low Earth orbit of Alpha Star for several days, until this space station passed her drifting orbit. Chiron continued, I had already discovered her at that time, and I planned to send her to the Ark. Report this situation, but she moved faster than me. She destroyed the 3 drones I sent for communication, and then invaded the interior of the space station. As you can see, my current picture, the appearance is entirely due to her. Kaylan suddenly understood everything. The reason why the coordinates he felt in his dream were erratic was because the space station was constantly rotating around Alpha Star. This coordinate was not static, but constantly changing with the relative position of the space station and the ground. And Chiron also said that his body became like this because of the semi-finished product, so the rotten and necrotic tentacles of the wall of flesh can be fully explained. After all, Kaylan having absorbed some of the black liquid from that semi-finished product, it's not surprising that his blood can have similar special effects. At this moment, Kaylan heard the whimpering call again, but this time, the call no longer seemed ethereal, the voice seemed to come from his ears. "You finally came." This was a young girl's voice. At this moment, the whimpers, sobs, grunts and the words "help me" that Kaylan had heard all came together. That's her. In Ian's head such an idea came up subconsciously. Although these sounds seem to be quite different when heard separately, especially the shrill cry like a baby that appeared in the nightmare, it is even more different in timbre and tone from the sounds heard in the East 9th District before. There is a huge difference. But the moment the words "you are finally here" rang out in his mind, he felt that the voices he heard before seemed to all become the same person, if the word person can be used to describe it, that thing. Compared to Kaylan, the leader of the heretical sect seemed to be even more shocked. His body was trembling slightly and he kept repeating the words "this is impossible." Suddenly, his right arm that turned into a black spear exploded without any warning, as if a huge force burst out from the inside out, and those black tentacles turned into the sky in the blink of an eye. Thick pus and blood flew all over the floor like dense raindrops. As soon as the pus and blood came into contact with the fleshy membrane on the ground, they reacted violently, just like adding dilute hydrochloric acid to sodium bicarbonate, and a large number of bubbles emerged from the mixture. As these bubbles burst, an unbearable fishy smell spread out in the space. Kaylan quickly took out the gas mask he got from the fire cabinet and put it on his face. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 406. There was another crackling sound, and this time, it was the man's head that exploded. That head, like a watermelon hit by a rounded heavy hammer, suddenly shattered into countless fragments of different sizes. The red and white melon flesh mixed with the juice splashed in all directions, and a round eyeball flew far away, and bounced on the ground several times before hitting the wall on one side of the hall. Then it stopped, spinning in circles. Although the metaphor of comparing the head to a watermelon has been used in various literary works, Kaylan still felt that this was the only way to appropriately express the scene he saw. The headless body twitched unnaturally, and then fell face down. Many black tentacles rushed out from the broken neck. They squeezed and entangled with each other, like some kind of frightened beast. The same, however, before these tentacles could completely break free from the dead body, the life force in their bodies had been exhausted. The plump and elastic mucous membranes became shriveled, the solid and powerful muscles dissolved into flowing pus, and the tiny suckers shrank into a ball, looking like the ones people used to make tea in the old era. Dried chrysanthemums. In just a few seconds, the monster residing in the man's body had withered and died, leaving behind an empty shell that seemed to have been weathered. He died like that. Kaylan looked at the corpse in the distance with some disbelief. He never imagined that the founder of the heretical sect could be killed so easily. "It's just a stand-in," Chiron said. "A person like him who values his own life very much would not be willing to take this risk with his real body." Substitute. At this time, Ian's peripheral vision seemed to catch something. He quickly raised his head and saw a dark black thing suspended on the dome of the hall. It was an ancient torture instrument shaped like a coffin, and the metal shell had traces of melting everywhere. "Iron Maiden," Kaylan murmured. Although the appearance had undergone some changes, he still recognized it at a glance. This big coffin was the one that was hung in the dome of flesh and blood at the highest point of Arezaka Tower that day. The Iron Maiden below. The asphalt-like black viscous liquid continued to drip from the gaps, but the liquid did not drip to the ground. Instead, it drew an almost circular arc in the air and returned to the Iron Maiden again. "You're finally here," the girl's voice sounded in Ian's head again. He subconsciously wanted to open his mouth to say something, but found that his lips seemed to be stuck with strong glue. Not just his lips, his entire body has been frozen, and except for him and the Iron Maiden suspended in mid-air, everything around him has turned into black and white. This scene is very familiar to Kaylan. This is clearly the scene after time stop is activated, but the problem is that he didn't use this ability at all just now. Moreover, this time there were no cries and wailings that he had long been accustomed to in his ears. The whole world was in a state of absolute silence, even Ian's own breathing and heartbeat disappeared over time. The Iron Maiden slowly descended from the air and hovered only 5 meters away from Kaylan. Although Kaylan couldn't move his body, his consciousness was not restricted. He wanted to break free from Shi Zhong's restraints, but found that no matter how hard he struggled, it was in vain. Even if he wanted to activate his Shi stop with all my abilities, I can't do it. Just like the saying goes, a small witch can see a big witch, he was completely suppressed by the other party. Leave it to be slaughtered. Kaylan couldn't help but think of this idiom. If he knew that this thing was in the sick village, then he would not be able to come here even to death. He originally thought that even if the thing in the Iron Maiden was, those who were not killed by the firing of the Ark's main cannon were probably captured by the gravity of Alpha Star and fell to a corner of the Earth's surface. But he never imagined that this thing would drift in low Earth orbit for several days and then invade a passing space station. Who the hell could have imagined this? Kaylan couldn't help but feel that he was wronged. The cover of the Iron Maiden slid open silently, and a large amount of black asphalt poured out from the inside, condensing into a smooth sphere that was nearly a person tall. When Kaylan stared at the sphere, a circle of ripple-like ripples suddenly appeared on the surface, and then, a slender, white palm stretched out from the inside of the sphere. For some reason, the phrase "come out of the mud but remain unstained" suddenly came to Ian's mind. Compared with the sphere made of black asphalt, this dazzling white palm formed a very sharp contrast. For a moment, Kaylan seemed to feel that all the light in this space was concentrated on this palm. The thing in the Iron Maiden is a humanoid creature. Kaylan was a little surprised. Although the other party's voice was a girl voice, he was used to seeing all kinds of monsters, but he would never compare the real girlish voice to that of a girl. Girls are connected. Among the people in the East 9 district who have been parasitized by the corrosion seed, there are many very good-looking women, but no matter how beautiful the skin is, in Ian's eyes it is just a body made of flesh and blood, especially after the corrosive seeds in the bodies of those beauties enter a period of rapid transformation. No matter how beautiful their faces are, there is only terror and horror left. But this time it was different. This time, Kaylan knew clearly in her heart that the owner of this palm was not a human being. No, it should be it. It was a head created by the Alpha civilization. A monster with terrifying power. However, after seeing this palm, Kaylan still had a pleasant feeling. What appeared in front of him was not, it seemed, not a palm, but a finely carved work of art, a work of art that could not be replicated by human technology, whether it was the shape of the bones or the texture of the skin. Can only be described with the word perfect. After the palm comes the wrist, then the forearm, upper arm, and even the entire upper body. Not long after, a human girl who looked to be around 13 or 14 years old, with an indescribably exquisite appearance, stood in front of Kaylan. She was not wearing any clothes, and every curve of her body interpreted the actual concept of the 4 words golden ratio, but it also showed the youthfulness of a girl just right. Her long pure white hair was like a waterfall. It usually hangs down and extends below the base of the legs. You finally came. This was the 3rd time Kaylan heard the sentence, but this time, it did not come from the depths of his mind, but came from the girl's mouth. The girl landed on the ground with her bare feet and walked towards Kaylan step by step. Wherever her feet touched, the fleshy membranes turned into snow-like ashes and floated away, and then were frozen in mid-air in the blink of an eye. The girl walked closer to Kaylan. She raised her head and stretched out a hand to touch K-Ian's cheek. The moment her soft fingertips came into contact with K-Ian's facial skin, the frozen time suddenly the flow resumed, and K-Lan suddenly jumped back and took a big step away from the girl.